The hours between dawn and dusk were a slow, exquisite torture. I didn't leave the house. Not because he decommanded it, though he had, and the command coiled around my will like a leash, but because my body refused to move. I sat on the edge of the bed, where his touch still burned my wrist, my jaw, the place behind my ear, where his breath had landed like a brand. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, not the mask of polite distance I'd memorized over 3 empty years. The other one, the one with wild eyes, and a voice that trembled with something ravenous. Let me make you that Omega you wanted so much. The words circled my skull like vultures. I should have been furious. I should have felt violated by the presumption, by the arrogant, possessive insanity of a man who'd ignored my existence for 3 years, suddenly deciding he owned me. And a part of me was furious. That part paced in my chest, alpha pride snarling, demanding I fight, demand respect, walk out the door and never look back. But there was another part, a part I hated with everything I had, a part that whispered, hot and shamed. He looked at me. He finally looked at me, and I don't care what it costs. I spent the day in a fever of preparation and dread. I showered again, scrubbing until my skin was pink, but I couldn't scrub away the phantom weight of his hand on my throat. I dressed carefully, silk shirt, dark slacks, the kind of armor I'd worn to boardrooms and galas. I told myself I was preparing for battle. I told myself I'd meet him with cold dignity, alpha to alpha, and demand, he explained, himself. But when the front door opened at 8 o'clock sharp, every rehearsed speech evaporated from my tongue. His scent hit me, first cedar wood and winter air, but tonight it was different. Tonight it was charged, dense, rolling through the foyer like a storm front. My own scent answered before I could stop it. Amber, bleeding into the air, with a desperation that humiliated me. He'd smell it, he'd know I'd been waiting, wanting, starving. He found me in the living room, standing by the window with my back to the door. I couldn't face him yet. I needed a moment to compose the mask, but he didn't give me a moment. Turn around. His voice was calm/quiet. The kind of quiet that's louder than a scream. I turned. He stood in the doorway to the living room, still in his coat, tie loosened, dark hair slightly disheveled. But it was his eyes that seized the breath from my lungs. They were black, eyes controlled, frigid, and underneath that ice, something frantic and burning. He looked at me the way a starving man looks at a feast he's finally allowed to touch. You stayed, he said, and it wasn't a question. It was satisfaction. Dark, malevolent satisfaction. You told me not to leave, and you obeyed. He stepped closer, slow, each footfall a heartbeat. You've always obeyed, haven't you, Sayuk? 3 years of playing the perfect spouse, and I never once said thank you. That was cruel of me. He stopped a foot away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm going to thank you tonight. Properly. My throat was dry. J1, we need to talk. What you said this morning. What I said this morning was the truth. He reached up and, with unbearable gentleness, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so intimate, so tender, that my eyes stung. You went looking for an Omega because I starved you. I accept that. I accept my failure. But the solution isn't to let you wander into the hollow and find comfort in some stranger's scent. The solution. His fingers trailed down the side of my neck, over my pounding pulse, to rest on my collarbone, is to give you what you need, myself. You're an alpha, I breathed. I'm an alpha. You can't just pretend I'm something I'm not. Pretend. He laughed, a low, dark sound that vibrated through his fingertips into my bones. Baby, I'm not going to pretend anything. You've spent 3 years containing yourself, managing your instincts, being so fucking strong for everyone. I've watched you. I've seen the exhaustion in your eyes. Don't you want to stop? Just for a night? Don't you want to let someone else be strong? The word baby hit me like a physical blow. He'd never called me anything but my name, clipped and formal. Now it dripped from his lips like honey laced with poison, and I wanted to drink it until I drowned. This is insane. I whispered yes. He agreed, and his hand slid around the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair and tightening just enough to tilt my head back. It's insane. It's been insane for 3 years. Living in this house with you, smelling you in every room, watching you smile at dinner, parties while I pretended I didn't. Want to ruin you in front of everyone we know? You think I didn't feel it? You think I didn't burn every single night, knowing you were in the guest suite, probably touching yourself, probably wishing I'd walk through the door? My face flamed. He saw it, and his smile sharpened. You did. You did wish it. He pulled me closer, his other hand settling on my hip, thumb pressing hard against the bone. You wanted me, and I gave you nothing. That was my sin. But tonight I'm going to atone. He kissed me, not gently, not tentatively, He kissed me like he was reclaiming territory he'd abandoned for years, his mouth hot and demanding, his tongue sliding against mine with a fury that stole my breath. My hands came up to his chest, to push him away. I told myself, but, instead, they fisted in the fabric of his coat, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly tilted for degrees. His scent flooded me. Cedar and cold air, and now something else. Something muskier, darker. The scent of an alpha in Rutor, close to it. My own body responded traitorously. Amber pouring from my glands in waves that screamed, submission, need, yours. He groaned against my mouth, a sound of raw animal satisfaction. That's it, he murmured, pulling back just enough to breathe against my lips. That's the scent I've been denying myself. You smell like a storm, Sehush. You smell like mine. He walked me backward, step by step, until my spine hit the wall. Then his body pressed against me, hard and unyielding, and I felt every inch of anyone who knew how to look. You're so responsive, he breathed against my wet skin, so desperate. It's beautiful. You're beautiful when you break. He took me to the master bedroom, the one I'd abandoned 3 years ago. The one, with sheets that still smelled faintly of him. He laid me down on that bed like I was something precious, and then he proceeded to destroy me, with the kind of methodical, devastating precision that proved he'd thought about this for years. Every touch was calculated, every whispered word, a scalpel. This is what you wanted, isn't it? His hands unbuttoned my shirt with slow, deliberate patience, exposing my chest to the cool air, and his hungry gaze. Someone soft, someone who'd let you be weak for once. He bent down and dragged his tongue along my collarbone, and I shuddered, a moan tearing from my throat. Then break for me, Sehyuk. I'll catch you, I'll hold you together when you fall apart. The night that followed was not gentle, boneless and trembling, and J1 propped himself on an elbow beside me, stroking my sweat-damp hair, with a tenderness that made my chest crack open. See, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my forehead. We're good together. We've always been good together. I was just too much of a coward to let myself have you. His thumb traced the mark on my neck with possessive reverence. But I'm done being a coward. From now on, you're mine. Fully. Completely. No more separate bedrooms. No more distance. I'm going to take care of you, Sahyuk. I'm going to give you everything you've been starving for. Through the haze of exhaustion and endorphins, a small, frightened voice whispered that this was wrong, that he'd ignored me for 3 years, that he'd only snapped into possession when he smelled another alpha's interest, that this was obsession, not love. But his arms were so warm, his voice was so steady, and I'd been so empty for so long. Okay, I whispered, and let him pull me against his chest. The cage door had closed, and I'd thanked him for locking it. The isolation began before I even realized it was happening. The next morning, I woke to find my phone gone. My laptop followed shortly after. A security precaution, J1 explained, kissing my shoulder as he handed me a new device, one with no contacts, no messages, no access to external networks. There are people who would love to use you against me, sweetheart. I'm protecting you. When I protested, his face fell into that wounded expression I was already learning to dread. After everything I shared with you last night, you're still fighting me. You're still trying to keep secrets. His voice cracked with convincing hurt. I opened my heart to you, Sahyuk. The least you can do is trust me. I gave in. I always gave in, because when he was pleased, he was everything attentive, adoring. A lover so passionate, I forgot the world existed. But when he was disappointed, the cold was worse than any punishment. He'd retreat, become distant, treat me with that old, familiar indifference that felt like dying. I'd do anything to avoid that. Cold. Anything. The household staff was replaced within a week. Fresh faces. Less gossip, J1 said smoothly, when I noticed the new housekeeper, the new driver, the new security guard, who watched me with blank, professional eyes. The only person left from before was Mrs. Park, the elderly cook. And I suspected Shistad, only because she was too loyal to him to be a threat. But even she wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. I stopped leaving the house. At first it was convenient. Sai had no reason to go out, and J1 made staying in so pleasant, so intimate. He'd come home early from work, bring me gifts, spend hours in bed with me, until I forgot my own name. Then it became habit. Then when I mentioned one day that I might visit a gallery downtown, his eyes flickered with something dark. I'd rather you didn't, he said, his voice deceptively light. There's been some unrest in the city. Protests. Altercations. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. He cupped my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones. I've only just started to really have you, Sahyuk. Don't make me worry. It sounded like love. It tasted like love. It was only later, lying alone in the bed, while he took a late call in his study, that I realized I hadn't seen a street, a stranger, an independent living soul. In nearly a month I was a trophy in a glass case, and I'd climbed into the case. Willingly. The arguments were vicious when they came. Inevitably, I'd push back, some remnant of alpha pride flaring, some desperate gasp. Do you still think about him? Do you still wonder what it would be like to let him comfort you? He'd step closer, his scent sharpening, and I'd feel the instinctive urge to bare my throat. Because I can remind you, right now, exactly who you belong to. Is that what you need? A reminder? I'd shake my head, tears of frustration and shame burning my eyes. And he'd sigh and pull me into his arms. I'm not your enemy, baby. I'm the only one who's ever actually fought for you. Your family sold you to me. Your friends abandoned you. The world outside would eat you alive. But I'm here. I'm always here. Why can't you just accept that? And the worst part, the part that made me sick with self-loathing, was that his words planted roots. I'd lie awake at night, his arm heavy across my waist, and think, is he wrong? Did anyone else ever really care? Is this the only kind of love I deserve? Slowly, meticulously, he rewrote my history, our history. He started telling the story of our marriage, as if it had always been a love story. I was protecting you, he'd say, tracing patterns on my skin in the afterglow. I knew how fragile you were after everything your family put you through. I didn't want to overwhelm you. I gave you space, time to heal. And look at us now. You ignored me for 3 years. I whispered once, very quietly. His hands stilled. I was terrified of how much I wanted you. I thought if I let myself touch you, I'd never be able to stop. I'd become obsessive, possessive, all the things I'm being now. He laughed softly, ruefully. I was right. But you don't seem to mind. I didn't respond, because the truth was, I didn't mind. I craved his obsession like a drug. It was the only thing that made me feel alive after years of feeling like a ghost. The ghost returned with wet eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry, J1. You're right. I'm ungrateful. I'm broken. Please don't leave me. He looked down at me, and for a moment, something flickered in his expression, triumph, maybe, or relief, or a hunger so deep, it had no name. Then he knelt too, pulling me into his arms, rocking me gently. I'm not going to leave you. I'm never going to leave you. You're mine, and I take care of what's mine. He kissed my hair, my temple, my tears. Let's not fight anymore, baby. It hurts me too much. I nodded against his chest, my hands fisting in his shirt like a child, clinging to safety. I didn't know anymore if he was my safe harbor or the storm that would drown me. Maybe he was both. Maybe it didn't matter. My one desperate act of rebellion came 3 months later. I'd found a way to communicate a burner phone, smuggled to me by a new staff member, who'd taken pity on the hollow-eyed alpha who never left the house. It was a tiny thing, prepaid, with only one number, programmed into it. Sujin, I didn't. Even though if he'd respond, I didn't know what I wanted to say. Help. Save me. Or just see me, the way you saw me that night. Before I forgot who I was, I sent a single message. It's Sesiuk, from the hollow. I think I'm in trouble. J1 found the phone within hours. I don't know how. Maybe the staff member confessed. Maybe he'd been monitoring me even more closely than I knew. I was in the bath when he walked in, the burner in his hand, his face a mask of terrifying calm. Explain this. His voice was soft, deadly. I sat up, water sloshing, my heart dropping into my stomach. I just needed to talk to someone. Anyone. I feel like I'm losing my mind. You're losing your mind. He laughed. A cracked, hollow sound. I've given you everything. My time, my protection, my body. I've devoted myself to you. And you sneak around behind my back to contact that Omega? That stranger who doesn't know you, doesn't love you, doesn't understand what we have. He threw the phone against the wall, and it shattered. Then he was on me, dragging me out of the bath by my arm, his grip bruising. I stumbled, naked and dripping, and he shoved me onto the bed. You want to be someone's Omega so badly? Then you're going to be mine. Not in the soft, gentle way I've been treating you. In the way that leaves no doubt. In the way that... And sweat. He cradled me against his chest, his lips pressing soft, reverent kisses to the wound on my shoulder. There, he breathed, sounding almost peaceful. Now you're really mine. Now nothing can take you from me. I cried. Quietly, helplessly, the tears streaming into his skin. And even as I cried, I pressed closer to him, seeking the warmth of his body, the anchor of his presence. Stockholm Syndrome, the old me would have called it. But the old me was dead. The man in this bed was something else, something broken and rebuilt in J1's image. I'm yours, I whispered into the dark. I know, baby. He stroked my hair, a lullaby in the motion. I know you are. The weeks that followed blurred into a fever dream of surrender. I stopped leaving the bedroom some days. I stopped asking about the outside world. J1 became my entire universe's voice, his scent, his hands, He was my tormentor and my savior, my cage and my home. When he was pleased with me, he was tender to the point of reverence, feeding me by hand, reading to me in the evenings, making my body sing with pleasure I'd never known existed. When I displeased him, the punishments were cold and precise years of silence, isolation in the bedroom, the withdrawal of his touch until I was sobbing and begging for forgiveness. I always begged, and he always forgave. The public still saw the perfect power couple. We attended galas and openings and family dinners, me draped on his arm in tailored suits that hid the marks beneath. I smiled for the cameras, made witty conversation, played the role I'd been playing for 3 years. Except now, there was a deadness behind my eyes that only J1 seemed to see. He'd lean close, his lips brushing my ear, and murmur, "Doing so well, baby. I'm proud of you." And I'd melt, because his pride was the only currency that mattered anymore. The end, if it can be called an end, came 6 months after the bonding bite. We were at a winter gala hosted by J1's company, a glittering affair of champagne and chandeliers, and the subtle dance of pheromones. I stood by his side in a black suit with a high collar that covered the scars of his teeth, my hair perfectly styled, my scent under careful control. To anyone watching, I was the picture of alpha elegance. But under the suit, my body was a canvas of his marks, fresh ones. From that very morning, he'd woken me at dawn with hands and mouth and whispered demands, and I'd given myself to him without hesitation, without thought, because that's what I did now. That's all I did. A business associate approached us, an older alpha with a genial smile. "You two are just the picture of a successful union," he said, raising his glass. "The years have been kind to your marriage." Jaewon's arm tightened around my waist, a subtle, possessive squeeze. "Thank you," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Sehok is my greatest achievement, my anchor. I don't know what I'd be without him." The associate nodded approvingly and moved on. I stood there, the words, "my greatest achievement," echoing in my hollow chest. I was not a person, I was an achievement, a thing he had built, broken, rebuilt, and I was so grateful, so desperately, pathetically grateful. Jaewon turned to me, his dark eyes searching my face. "You're quiet tonight." I looked up at him, the man who had isolated me, gaslit me, forcibly, bonded me, and then held me through every nightmare he'd created. The man I hated, the man I loved with a devotion that felt like sickness. "I'm just tired," I said. And then, because I knew what he needed to hear, because his need had become my need, because the line between his desires and mine had dissolved into nothing, I leaned up and pressed a soft kiss to his jaw. "I'm yours, J1, always." The satisfaction that flickered across his face was the only reward I needed. He pulled me closer, his lips grazing the shell of my ear. "That's my good boy, my perfect, broken, beautiful boy." I closed my eyes and let the noise of the gala wash over me. Somewhere out there, Sujin was probably still doing crisis work, still saving people who could be saved. Somewhere out there, Minga was living her life, free of the cage I'd unwittingly stepped into. Somewhere out there, a version of me still existed, who would have fought, who would have run, who would have chosen freedom. But that version was a ghost, and I was here, in the arms of the only man who'd ever made me feel seen, even if his seeing destroyed me. I lifted my head and met his gaze. My eyes, I knew, were flat, dead in a way that no amount of champagne could brighten. But my lips curved into a smile that was genuine in its own twisted way, because I'd learned to find genuine happiness in the only thing I had left, his possession. The band struck up a slow, romantic melody, and J1 pulled me onto the dance floor. We moved together like we'd been doing this for a lifetime, his hand firm on my lower back, his scent wrapping around me like a leash I'd learned to love. "You're trembling," he murmured. "Cold," I lied. He pulled me closer, his body a wall of heat against mine. "I'll keep you warm. I'll always keep you warm." I let my head rest against his shoulder, the bite mark hidden beneath my collar, throbbing in time with the music. The guests around us saw a love story. The staff who'd been paid off saw a strategic arrangement. But what we were, what we'd become, was something no one could name. A beautiful, toxic ruin. A cage made of whispered promises and shattered pride. "I'm yours," I thought, and the words no longer felt like defeat. They felt like home. A terrible, suffocating, addicting home. And in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by glittering lights and admiring eyes, Kong Se-huk finally stopped fighting. His cage was complete, and he'd never, ever leave.
Thank you guys for making it through end of this video. I appreciate you sitting with this story. This part was meant to be heavier, where part 1 showed the spark and the first fracture. Part 2 is the slow, intimate collapse. I wanted to explore how strong someone like who started as an alpha in every sense can be methodically dismantled, not through brute force alone, but through a perfect storm of love bombing, isolation, guilt, and intermittent reinforcement. And Javon doesn't just control Sayuk, he rewrites his reality until the cage feels like home. My thought as a creator are that honestly writing this was uncomfortable at times. I kept asking myself how far can I push this before it stops being compelling and become just cruel. The answer for me was to stay inside Seyuk's head the whole time. So you feel the seduction and the horror at the same time. That push and pull is the point. You are supposed to feel a little sick at how much you understand why he stays. Like, this isn't a healthy love story. It's not dark romance in the way that it still gives you a tidy redemption arc. It's a tragedy dressed in a silk sheet and possessive like kisses. I'm interested in the psychology of it, how loneliness and long-term emotional neglect make people vulnerable to someone who finally sees them, even if that seeing is actually devouring. So, what you read here is gaslighting, gradual isolation from friend and support network, rewriting history, love bombing, followed by a cold withdrawal, making the victim feel like they're crazy or ungrateful one. These are classic patterns in abusive relationship. In real life, this doesn't usually end in a glamorous gala with a possessive dance. Like it end in a eroded self-worth, lost years, and sometimes physical danger. The Omega were setting letters exaggerate the instinct and biology, but the emotional manipulation is very human. If any part of Siriok's descent felt too similar, please know that wanted is like normal, but love shouldn't make you disappear. Real love doesn't isolate you from the world or punish you for having boundaries. If you are in something that feels even a friction like this, where you are walking on eggshells, losing your friends, explaining away red flags, or feeling like you're the crazy one for being upset, reach out for someone. You are not ungrateful or broken for wanting freedom. So, say you stop fighting in the last scene. I'm curious, where do you think the story should go from here? Do stories like this need a rescue, a darker descent, or something in between? I read your comments and they genuinely shape how I approach the next part. Thank you again for reading something this heavy. It means a lot that you trust me with this character and this theme. Take care of yourself out there. Fiction is just a safe place to explore darkness, but your real life deserve right and safety. Until next video, stay thoughtful, stay kind to yourself, and maybe check on the strong friends who never seem to need checking on. They might be the ones silently breaking the most. See you soon. Bye bye.